Okay, so I really need to make a start on my Old Testament essay. I'm looking at the question now. It's my Old Testament essay on the book of Judges. And so let me read you the question that I'm writing for my essay. And it's this: discuss how the phrase, "in those days Israel had no king," frames the portrayal of justice and leadership in Judges 17 to 21. So it's a question about context. How can you summarize the context of Judges with this phrase, "in those days there was no king"? And the question carries on. There's a second part to this. It says, how does this critique the failure of human leaders to administer justice? And what does this reveal about the need for divine justice and leadership in the life of believers? So this is more towards application, speaking about how even today there is injustice, and how does Judges then speak into those situations of injustice? And how then does it awaken this realization that what we need is God's justice, God's leadership at the end of the day? So I think that's kind of like the tenor, that's kind of like the meat of the question. Okay, how do we deal with this? Let's look at the context first. So the context of Judges 17 to 21, this is the very last part of Judges, does have that phrase, "in those days there's no king." And you can think of it as there being no leadership, no government, because they didn't have a king at that point of time yet. And also, interestingly, no judges. So Judges ends with no judges. I'm not sure whether you knew that. Actually, there's no Gideon, no Samson, no Deborah at the end of Judges. So yes, there's this absence of leadership in the whole society of Israel at this point of time. At the same time, actually, there are lots of religious leaders. So it's not true to say that they didn't have any leaders, but actually they had a very strong presence of priests. And at the center of these chapters are actually two Levites. And Levites are priestly descendants. They are meant to give their whole lives towards serving God. And instead, they lead the whole society into lots of immorality and idolatry. And in fact, actually, Moses and Aaron are mentioned in these chapters. The two arguably top prophets and high priests in the whole history of Israel. They are mentioned in these chapters because their descendants are the ones that lead the people astray. So again, that contrast of there being no political leadership, but lots and lots of religious leadership in the time of Judges. So what is it saying? I don't know. I have to think about it more. Maybe it's kind of like saying that even without a government, and sometimes you think, oh, if my pastor were the president, I don't know, probably no one says that. But if you think like maybe your pastor is like the best person in the whole world and you think that this person can do no wrong, actually I think the book of Judges is a little bit cynical about that. And not about your pastor, but about any kind of human figurehead that takes the place of God. Even a godly person, even any Christian leader. Because at the end of the day, I think what it's trying to say is that only God can be king, only God can administer perfect justice. Yeah. And that brings us, I think, to the second part about application today. Because today, we do have, I think, the balik lah. I think we have more political leadership and less religious leadership. And so the presence of a political oversight, and this includes like police forces and armies, defending the country, that kind of thing, and ensuring justice. They are there because God has instituted, them into power. That's what Romans 13 tells us. But at the same time, they're imperfect. And so the question is saying, how does Judges speak into these situations of maybe failure and imperfection? And it's also trying to awaken the need for divine justice and leadership. So how does it kind of like help us see that no matter how perfect your system is, and most of us would say it is very imperfect, but even if you did have that perfect political party in power or that ideal prime minister or president in place, actually that will still fall very, very much short of God's own standard of justice and God's own direction when it comes to leadership of His people. Yeah. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. But yeah, that's where I am at right now. And that's the question I'm going to be working on this coming week. So I have to work on this because, the deadline is in 2 weeks. But I'm actually flying off to the UK in a week's time. So I'm trying to get as much of it done this week. So, yep, that's where I am right now.